Hello, welcome to In the Chute round three with the Hash Knife Ranch. And today's question will be, what is the difference between gated horses and non-gated horses or non-gated types of horses? All right, I'll throw it to you, Dad.
Okay, so this episode can last how many hours? Up to a
Probably, I
couple
was gonna say
days?
two or three for sure.
God, yeah. I mean,
Just with the
teach
experience of
clinic.
you and me. So, like, for example, you, myself, and Braden have trained all types of horses, but you've trained I don't know, have you trained more gated horses than non-gated horses?
I,
So okay,
I
questions in
don't
the
know.
air. I for sure we've looked at it because I haven't had that many horses under my belt.
Right.
I've trained far more non-gated horses than I have gated horses, and then my brother on the other chance, who is spoiled rotten, has trained pretty much all gated horses and maybe one or two non-gated horses. So it's definitely, there's an interesting perspective there. I think no matter who has handled or trained a gated or non-gated horse.
Yeah. And just for to qualify, your spoiled brother is the hero firefighter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Little sibling rivalry going on here. Oh God, yeah. Well, here's a God. This is tough. Um,
And
I,
I'll throw it out there. If we need to go a couple minutes over, we can. We try and stick between 12 to
yeah,
15
I think
minutes
we
for
can do.
these segments, but like for this is an intricate conversation. We can have it in a podcast if we need, but I think, if
Yeah.
you need to, let's go
Well,
5 minutes
we'll do
over.
this. Yeah, I think we can work this in pretty easily. It won't be very specific, but let's sit on a really broad scale.
Yeah.
And I won't talk about necessarily breeding. We can always do breeding at another time, but a non-gated horse is a horse that will walk and trot and lope or canter, depending on whether you're east or west of the Mississippi,
Yeah.
and of course gallop. So a trot is an intermediate gait or a gait between the walk and the lope or canter. So that trot is a gait that is
A diagonal
suspended.
gate.
It's both the front and a hind from the opposite sides, like a left front and a right rear, come up at the same time and set down at the same time, and then the opposite, the right front and left hind, come up. They work in unison, but they're diagonal, and
Yeah.
the horse comes off the ground.
And the easiest way
So
to probably picture that for anybody who's not quite understanding, if you were to run, if you were to just go for a jog, you start running for a couple of yards or so, you'll see your left foot hits and your right arm comes up. And
yeah,
as your left arm comes up, your right foot hits. And that's exactly what a trot is for a horse. And
yes,
that's exactly what you're talking about.
yep, yeah. Now, actually, that's a good point, because here's about context. I've done that in clinics where I'm teaching it and having people do that, and
You
then you can
used me as
also
a dummy one time, and it was interesting. It was
you
hard,
use
but it was
a dummy
interesting.
a lot. So
Yeah.
you just didn't know you were really that big of a dummy. So I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, that's a very good way for people to put that, or for you to put that, so they can visualize that. Gated horses have a walk. They can have a trot. They can have, and then also have a variation of that trot, which they can become a little less what we call square or diagonal, and start to work towards where the legs are actually working in unison on the same side as a
Parallel in a sense.
parallel gait.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
exactly.
then
From
and then to
diagonal
kind
to
of bring it
parallel.
back to my example, imagine you're running again, your left leg's hitting, but instead of your right arm coming up, it's actually your left arm.
Yep.
And think about that for a second. It's weird. I've actually done it on accident in practice before, and it was the weirdest feeling I ever had because my entire body went to one side and then it went to another side. And it was
Right.
just so weird. But yeah, your left leg will hit the ground and your left arm will come up, and then your right arm will hit the ground and your right arm will come up. And that's a parallel gait is how we say it, or lateral gait really is.
Lateral, yeah, because
Yeah.
it's on one side.
Yeah.
Another way that you can do that, if you wanted to practice that, is I've had people like you guys playing with it,
Yeah.
climb a ladder, where you
Right.
force yourself to do that, at the
Yeah.
same time. So the trot becomes more lateral or parallel in its movement from the trot. And then what that means is you'll still be at a diagonal gait, but when the front foot of that pair hits slightly before the hind foot does, now you are not in a 2-beat gait. You're in a 4-beat gait because those two hit and then the other two hit, but they're not hitting at the same time. Right. That is a foxtrot. Then you go to a running walk where they're all working independently, not in pairs, but each foot is working, doing its own thing. One's pushing off as the other one is coming up, and the other two, one is firmly on the ground as the other one is starting to lift off.
And the other thing too, and just a quick context, because again, we can go hours into this. A running walk for us, we talk about it because it's the horses that we breed, Tennessee walking horses. But there's the same gait is called various different names across the breeds, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, you may have a now we'll may be specific, Peruvian Paso, Pasofinos, Icelandics.
Yeah.
You'll have everything from Sobreandando to a Tolt.
There you go.
To
same gait, 3 different types of gaited horses, but that's how you explain it based off that breed specifically.
Yeah, and every, like the stepping pace and the Sobreandando, they're the same, but every culture or every breed has a specific name for it if they're using those descriptions to see what this horse is doing, explain what they're doing. So you go to the running walk, which is all 4 independents. Now you start moving more lateral, and you'll have what's called a stepping pace, where the legs are moving together on one side, but now the hind foot is setting down slightly before the front is. Remember on the foxtrot, it was front to left. Now it's that way. And then you go to a hard pace, which is both legs picking up and setting down at the same time.
Yeah.
Quick. Those are intermediate gaits. So you got a real wide variety of gaits or movement of those feet between the walk and the trot, or I mean the walk and the lope, and they're all associated with the trot. Intermediate, about that kind of speed. Some can be very, very fast, much faster, smoother, rockier. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that will explain or be a trait of that particular gait, but we didn't want to go down the rabbit hole, I don't think, of each gait, but that kind of breaks it up, explains how they change within an intermediate gait. So most non-gated have a single intermediate gait called a trot. Gated horses have a variety of these intermediate gaits between the walk and the trot. And then there's, of course, disposition is a whole different deal.
Right. But what I'm thinking of just off the top of my head, they've got 5 intermediate gaits. They've got for example, the running walk, pace, stepping pace, trot, foxtrot. There's just basic 5 intermediate. Then you get to the trot or canter. And then when
you can also have a single foot. Right.
Yeah. Well, later time, but for sure. Like that's essentially, you think about it with your own car, your own vehicle. If you were to have a 6-speed car, suddenly you ramp it up to a 9 or 10 speed, which doesn't exist, but it suddenly opens a whole nother world to you, because you're like, oh wow, I didn't realize this actually existed in the world, but it's now put in front of you. And then and that's where I think again, we got about 5 minutes on the shelf for us, but it's interesting because especially when me growing up, watching the clients that would have come and contacted you either through the phone or through the internet, a lot of the times it has been people who are older or people like you who have had previous back injuries, and they're like, listen, I love my quarter horse, or I love my non-gated horse. Let's just throw any non-gated breed out there. And for anybody who has any questions, non-gated breed, you're looking at Parisian, Clydesdale, your Arabian.
That's draft. I mean, you're getting another classification there altogether.
It's still not a gated breed though, right? So I mean, I'm just throwing all these breeds out there off the top of my head, and you got all these breeds. A wild Mustang. Those are all Mustang. I don't really consider a separate breed, but it is in a weird way.
In a weird way.
Yeah,
Arabians.
but those all don't have gaits other than walk, trot, essentially loper, canter, and then the run. And uh and being able to suddenly go, man, I can add these extra lower gears that are smoother and I don't have to trot and jar my back. That's where we've gotten so much feedback of people being, I love my horse. I no harm against them or anything like that, but I just can't do it. My body physically cannot do it anymore. And that's why I'm coming to you guys. And then we open up this world of, hey, it's okay. You can use these different gaits. And not only that, but it also depends on the horse. And I think that goes down towards, you've explained before, conformity of a horse. For example, my horse, he's getting older, but my horse, I tell you what, I don't know if I've ever had another horse I've ever experienced. That's how I should say. If I've ever experienced another horse that has had a more smooth stepping pace. Most of the time, we try and aim for that smooth 4-beat running walk, but with him, I have never had an issue saying, you know what, I don't care. Normally, we're trying to keep discipline and keep themselves collected so that they can do an even 4-beat pace. With him and me, I don't care. It's a stepping pace because I can get somewhere very quickly on a very smooth gait, which is a stepping pace. It's a little weird if you're not used to it because you're kind of going like this a lot, but it's one of the smoothest gaits, specifically with him. Now, if it's with my brother's horse, Mountain Man, that's a different story. I think Mountain Man's probably more of a foxtrotter, if I remember
Yeah,
correct.
that's correct.
Yeah, but
they're related.
Right, they are, because Flax, my horse, came from the grandmother to my brother's horse, and
Right.
in the most humanistic scenario. But I think that's the best way to put it, really, because it while it's also comfortable for you, it's also looking at the conformity of the horse and how it best works for them, because sometimes it may not be what we desire as the trainer, saying this is what we're trying to discipline them towards, because it's also a sort of discipline rather than just the gait. It's the discipline of, hey, this is what I want them to do because I'm telling them to do it, so I expect them to do it, in the sense of like leadership as well. But I think that's what's special, is that it's not just what we want, it's also how the horse is designed as this great spirit has intended, in a sense.
Well, and you're right in that you've heard me say thousands of times probably that you don't expect a weightlifter to run a marathon and vice versa. And that's exactly the way this is. If the horse is conformed or his body is built to be a stepping pace or a hard pacer, the best that you can hope for is to maybe get a good stepping pace out of them. And the same way with a foxtrot, if a horse is really trotty, maybe get a foxtrot out of him to break that up a little bit, but don't do anything. Don't expect a horse that's really conformed to pace to make them trot.
Right.
You can damage ligaments, muscle, bone is eventually, their feet. You don't want to do that. So you do the best you can without hurting the horse. And you're right. Flax, as he is right there at the top. There's been a couple other horses that I've been, holy cow, I'm doing a stepping pace and it feels like I'm doing a running walk. I cannot. It is so smooth that it's so subtle. It's like, wow, this is incredible.
If it was anybody else, I'd be like, no, make that horse do what you want. But when he falls into that, I'm like, I don't care. It works for me. It's just fine.
Well, and this gets more into gait, and we get to cover this later. But one thing about a gaited horse in that intermediate gait, they will cover ground faster with more speed than one that's non-gated, because you're looking at a trot versus even like a stepping pace. A horse with a stepping pace will absolutely just fly away from a horse that's trotting and do it smoothly. So there's about speed and efficiency of the movement. We can, that's for another In the Chute, or maybe that might even be a Hash Knife Hangouts topic, because it's long. It could be long enough.
Well, and I think just again, kind of wrapping it up, because we're really coming close on time. I did see an episode when I was growing up. I think it was Wild West Technology or something on History Channel, and their thing was, the technology of this particular robber. I think they were identifying Billy the Kid, and it was, his 6-shooter, his horse, which was his transportation, and then essentially his knowledge of how to evade law and stuff like that. And when they got to his horse, they said, well, what was revolutionary about his particular time was the horse, because never before had a quarter horse at the late 1800s really been utilized for a quick movement. And in that sense, it was the trot. Their quick movement was the trot. But a gaited horse, and again, I think you and I will probably discuss this in a shoot or a hangout. The gaited horse across the homestead, not only the South. This will probably be a hangouts, frankly, because there's history with like Robert E. Lee and his horse being a gaited horse and stuff like that.
Paul Revere.
Yeah, but it's that interest of, they talk about the gaited horse, but nobody ever talks, or they talk about the non-gaited horse and the importance of the quarter horse, because the quarter horse was famous for, what's a quarter horse? It can cover a quarter mile. That's why it's called a quarter horse. It can cover a quarter mile faster than any other horse, because it's got those fast sprint reflexes. And it's interesting to see the technology, but they never cover the gaited horse. And I think that's interesting because, like you said, that stepping pace, or that foxtrot or whatever, that intermediate gait can definitely get you faster in a much more smoother manner. Yep. And it's just something that people don't recognize nearly as much as they should. So,
well, how about we put this one out to pasture?
Sounds good.